How to make money in Myanmar later in the program. The Philippines has one of the largest delegations at this year's World Economic Forum East Asia and will host the event next year. It's also here in force because Myanmar will chair ASEAN next year, with the Philippines in bitter dispute with China over the South China Sea, still a major issue. For decades, the Philippines was labelled the sick man of Asia, but this year recorded its strongest growth in recent history. President Aquino and some of his senior cabinet members are at the World Economic Forum, among them Cesar Purisima, the Philippines Secretary of Finance. Secretary, very good to be talking to you. The Philippines have been an economic success story in recent years, still considerable poverty of course, but are there lessons from the Philippines experience that can be directly applied to Myanmar, do you think?
Well, I think at the heart of the Philippine success is better governance. The thesis of President Aquino is good governance is in good economics. And we've proven that the past 3 years. We've increased the growth trajectory of the country. Last year we grew at 6.8%, the first quarter 7.8%, despite the fact that our exports were down and mining was down about 20%. Philippines is a very blessed country, just like Australia. We're rich in minerals, we speak English, we have a very young population, we're at the right part of the world, and yet for the longest time we have underperformed. And if you look at it, it's really about governance. And President Aquino came to office with that in agenda, and he's walking his talk. He's opened up the economy, he's made it easier to do business in the country, he's gained confidence from the financial markets, allowing us to borrow at lower cost. Now interest is down to 16.6% of our budget compared to as high as over 30%. So that means that we have more to spend in education, more to spend in healthcare, more to spend in infrastructure. And that's what exactly has happened. The dividends from good governance has been invested with a 50% increase in education budget, 77% increase in healthcare, 260% increase in a social safety net to make sure that the poorest of the poor keep their children in school and bring them to health centers, 40% increase in infrastructure spend. So our goal is to get deeper into this virtuous cycle that we're in so that we can ultimately alleviate poverty.
So you're suggesting, are you, that wealth creation and alleviation of poverty go hand in hand, that you can't have one without the other? Is that the sort of message that you think ought to be applied here in Myanmar?
I think that's a lesson of many countries, the communist countries included. We need engines for growth, we need entrepreneurs, we need the profit motivation for people to take risk. The economy has to churn, and it's business that is the main driver of the economy. In the case of the Philippines, the government budget is only about 20% of the economy. So even if we double it, that's a small portion. It's important that the business sector gain confidence. And as a result of the good governance agenda of President Aquino, our businesses have followed suit by putting more of their money into the country, committing them to longer terms for investment. And they've been able to do this because they have easier access to capital, lower cost of access to markets, because the financial markets have now rated us 2 notches above investment grade, higher than what credit rating agencies are rating us.
So for Myanmar, there has to be a real priority given to governance, to issues, transparency, attacking corruption, the rule of law, certainty for investment. That is, that if people choose to invest here, A, they know they'll make money, and B, they know they'll be able to get their profits out.
Well, just like the Philippines, Myanmar is a blessed country with very rich natural resources, 60 million very talented, hungry people to attain their dreams. In fact, in the early 60s or late 50s, Myanmar and the Philippines were identified by the World Bank as the 2 most likely to succeed in this part of the world. Somehow, the 2 of us lost our way. But we're happy for both of us. In the case of the Philippines, we elected President Aquino with the largest mandate ever of a Philippine president, and he's using this mandate to transform the country.
You talked a moment ago about losing your way. One of the reasons that the Philippines lost its way was the blight of sectarian religious violence, and indeed worse. This is a problem here too in Myanmar. Do you think that a country like Myanmar can achieve its full potential unless there is reconciliation between ethnic, religious groups?
On the Philippine situation first, it's less sectarian violence. It's really more bad governance. As you know, we were under a dictatorship for a long time, and we had a political patronage system, and that President Aquino is correcting. In fact, the small sectarian issues we have down south is being addressed. We're in the process of coming to a framework agreement and finalizing that to achieve a peace agreement, which is also going to offer another engine of growth in the country, in the area of Mindanao. In the case of Myanmar, I think all of this, ultimately, these sectarian issues can also be linked to economic issues. When people's lives are improved, when they see their future here on earth as something that is improving, when they see that the life of their children can be better than theirs, no? Then I think we'll have people who are more harmonious, who are more in sync with what the government's trying to do. And that's why we cannot leave individuals alone. We have to make sure that as the country moves forward, we make sure that it is inclusive growth, that no one is left behind.
One other issue of great importance to Myanmar is the question of ASEAN leadership. Myanmar takes over chairmanship of ASEAN next year. Is the Philippines expecting that it will prove a happier experience for you in what is termed the disputes over the South China Sea, what you call the West Philippines Sea, than was the case when Cambodia was in the chair a year ago?
Well, we're happy about Myanmar's chairmanship because they're now coming out into the international community. For the longest time, they were like a pariah in the international community. And I think we're giving 60 million people of the world an opportunity to actualize their potential. Relationship among countries in today's world are multidimensional. There are people-to-people issues, there are cultural issues, there are trade and investment issues, there are political issues. And you may have disagreements in one area, but I think the sum of the positives is greater than the differences. And that's how we'd like to look at our relationship within ASEAN, among our neighbors, because we've proven that a global environment where each country does what they do best is good for everyone.
If Myanmar, as chairman of ASEAN, did one thing as far as the disputes in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea are concerned, what would it be? What would you like them to do better than they did, than was the case when Cambodia was in the chair? After all, the Philippines and many other nations depend very, very heavily on trade through these seas, and any problems there could affect not just the regional economy, but the global economy too.
I think one thing I'd like to see is a reestablishment of ASEAN centrality in everything that we do, because the success of ASEAN as an integrated market will depend on the centrality of the group. And whether it is on trade negotiations, on other issues, I think we need to harmonize our views on this. They don't have to favor one country or the other. I think it's important that we agree on following rule of law, following rule of market, making sure that standards are harmonized, making sure that we make it easy for capital and people to move. I think if we're able to resume that focus on the centrality of ASEAN, Myanmar would have a very successful chairmanship.
On that issue of ASEAN centrality, is it also the case that given the responsibilities that ASEAN now has in all these matters that you have mentioned, that it actually needs to look at some of its guiding principles, the question of non-interference in each other's affairs? This is a difficulty in terms of effective decision-making, is it not?
Well, we've gone this far because of the ASEAN way. We've gone this far because we realize that ASEAN is not a homogeneous group. We have among the richest countries in Asia and some of the poorest countries in Asia, the most advanced and the less advanced. No? And I think recognition of that fact is very important. And we've gone this far because we recognize that and we came up with our ASEAN way. And I think we should continue doing so. and ultimately we'll all get to the destination.
Secretary, you've been very generous with your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
for the
much.
opportunity.